guys, in today's video, we are talking about how shorts are all buying AMC, how they can't maintain margin anymore, warnings of a short squeeze, and many more in this video. First, we're taking a look at this. AMC stock, Goldman Sachs has sold off 100% of their put. UBS increases number of shares by 30% to 710,000. Intech investment buys 57.5% more shares now, owning 203,000 AMC stock, and Jane Street sells off equivalent shares, puts, and calls, equals their downside hedge is no longer needed. So this is what we have always talked about. Institutions have been buying into AMC. We knew that they were accumulating AMC shares, but now even more on top of that is the short sellers of AMC are all starting to increase their long side exposure and are actually decreasing their short side exposure. We obviously talked about selling off their puts. We talked about how UBS is trying to increase their shares, which we'll talk more about that later on as well. We're obviously talking about Intel. We're talking about how Jane Street is no longer trying to protect their downside hedge, obviously showing their optimism in AMC, understanding that they're trying to optimize and utilize the upside potential and to try and maximize obviously their profit by doing so. And so this is what we talked about. And again, some of the people that are in this, whether it's Goldman Sachs, whether it's UBS, we knew that they were once short sellers of AMC and potentially still are, but are just decreasing their short percentages. Again, Goldman Sachs, spoofer of AMC, what we talked about in the past, but yet they're selling off their puts. UBS holding on to, of course, the swaps of AMC and GME. They are faced with problems right now, and in times like this, they're increasing their shares by 30%. And that's how we know these shorts are extremely worried. That's how we know that they are worried that something is about to happen. Because if they were still spoofing AMC, if they were making profit off of shorting AMC, they wouldn't get rid of obviously what's working. And they definitely wouldn't get rid of it if they didn't know that something was about to happen. You can see here, are Swiss regulators going to win the battle with UBS over increased capital reserves? What was hidden away with Credit Suisse must be even worse than imagined. As you guys can see, UBS Group AG is heading for defeat in the first round of its effort to water down the Swiss government's law that could force it to maintain as much as $25 billion in extra capital. So for those of you who don't know, essentially what it is that UBS is being required to increase how much capital they have. Now, the reason for this is very simple. Essentially, UBS has tons of positions that are extremely over leveraged, that obviously have extreme exposure of risk, and the government, the regulation isn't happy with that, and they need them to have the capital in order to make sure that when things does go south, they can obviously cover those positions. Now, you may be wondering what those positions are. Well, obviously the answer here is, again, very obvious, like we've said in the past. Mainly it's because of the toxic swap positions in which they inherited from Credit Suisse, which is obviously the AMC and GME swaps. Now, of course, there are others, but we've known in the past just how big these swap positions are and just how toxic they are. And so this is going back to what we've said at the start in terms of UBS increases the number of shares by 30%. Firstly, we are seeing that in a time where UBS right now are trying to free up capital, are trying to increase their capital liquidity, yet they're buying more AMC shares. Why is that? Again, we have seen these articles telling people stay away from AMC, telling people to never buy AMC, telling people to sell AMC. Yet we're seeing institutions who are on the verge of bankruptcy right now, who are faced with so many liquidity problems, who are faced with these toxic swaps, still buying into AMC. And that itself should already sum everything up in terms of how worried the shorts are. And so just like we talked about how because they need to increase their capital, one of the things that they're obviously trying to prepare is by buying AMC shares. Because one of the biggest reasons why they need to increase their capital is because of how much risk exposure there is in these AMC and GME swaps. And in order to minimize the exposure, in order to minimize the risk, obviously by buying AMC, you're protecting yourself from that. And this is what we talked about with understanding how they realize the squeeze is obviously coming. You have to understand we have billions of purchases locked up. They're completely screwed. And just like tons of others, they have purchased and just buying, and they still haven't sold any shares. So obviously they can't do this forever. Sooner or later, someone's going to find out that the shorts hidden overseas in swaps are enough to bring the entire system down in GME and or AMC alone. Now, this last line, the overseas swaps are enough alone to obviously bring it down. And going back to what we talked about here, what did UBS inherit from Credit Suisse that are making them needed 25 billion extra capital? Obviously, the toxic swaps. And so you can start to see how everything's linking up right now. And if we go from to back to front, the swaps are enough to bring the entire system down. Hence why they need $25 billion in extra capital. Hence why they're trying to buy AMC shares right now, because they're trying to protect themselves from this. So everything is starting to make sense right now. Everything is starting to all fit in the puzzle right now. We are going to take down these short sellers. You can also see hedge fund short selling has been recently massive. Hedge fund shorts have surged $25 billion over the last three reports, the most in at least 10 years. Moreover, short as a share of total open interest hits 41%. So if you need an idea of how shorts are increasing, this is it. But another thing to focus on is we're seeing how institutions are trying to switch their position to short exposure. But when you take a look at the individual stocks, because bear in mind, this is talking about how hedge funds are betting on US stocks decline in terms of overall. But going back to what we talked about here, when you're looking at individual stocks, whilst the overall stock market is getting shorted, AMC is seeing more and more people buying. Remember, there are of course shorts in AMC, but the reason why they're shorting AMC isn't because they're trying to fundamentally short AMC. It isn't because AMC has bad fundamentals. It isn't because AMC is a company that's going bankrupt. But it's because the shorts who are already trapped in this play have to short AMC. And what we can see is that the ones who aren't trapped in this play are all buying AMC, despite the fact we're seeing them all trying to bet on the US stocks decline. And you can see this is the largest increase in at least a decade, like we've seen here. So this is something that we have to bear in mind. And this is to talk about just truly how screwed these short sellers are. When everyone is shorting, when everyone is thinking that all of these stocks are going to go down, they're selling their longs, they're shorting on these shares. AMC individually is seeing that the short side exposure for the ones who aren't trapped potentially are decreasing. Again, Goldman Sachs sold 100% of their puts. You can see that the ones who are trapped are trying to buy AMC shares, and the ones who aren't, of course, affected by AMC shorts whatsoever are all trying to buy into AMC, and that's what we know where we are at. That's how we know these shorts are all screwed. You can also see, here we go, ECB is warning of a gold short squeeze. So you can see, additionally, disruptions in the physical gold market could increase the risk of a squeeze. Now, I want to extend onto this in terms of not just talking about, of course, the gold squeeze alone, but it's about understanding the effects that it can have. When you read more into this, you talked about the delivery in derivative contracts, leaving themselves exposed to potentially large losses. You can also see market participants could be subject to significant margin calls. And you have to understand is that the ones who are affected by gold will also have influence in the stock market. And if they were to see any disruptions in the gold market, they will see their positions in the stock market also being affected, whether it's to liquidate those positions in order to maintain margin, whether it's the margin becomes so big that all of their positions gets wiped, whether it's the derivative contracts that we've seen in the past all getting wiped out because of the trillions of dollars that are out there. These are all things that will affect not just the gold market, but the overall market. And this is why we talked about how right now, loads of shorts, loads of institutions are extremely worried. And we talked about how it's only a matter of time before the short squeeze happens, because they all are starting to run out of money. They are faced with not only the lack of money, they're faced with positions that could easily blow up and cost them billions of dollars, which again, they don't even have right now. And overall, will have to all face margin calls and liquidate their positions. And so this is the talk about how it's only a matter of time before we beat them, and it seemingly looks like we're getting close to it. And guys, thanks for watching this video. I'll catch you guys next time.